What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Free Speed Podcast, your go-to podcast for navigating fitness and life with purpose. We're your host, Calvin Fogler.
And I'm Natasha Bozic.
And it is episode 17 today. Episode 17, which is crazy to say because when we first started this, we had set a goal to hit 20 episodes.
Yeah.
And we were pretty certain that we would do it. But for it to actually be coming close to 20 episodes is hard to believe. And so anyone who's listening, we really appreciate it. And whether it's your first episode or your 17th episode, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Today, we have a little bit of a different style episode than you might be used to. We thought it would be a little beneficial to just kind of do an interview style episode where you would kind of just get to know us each more on just a deeper level. So today, Calvin's going to be interviewing me on my whole journey on building my brand, my personal strength and finding confidence and just everything like that. So stay tuned if you want to get to know me a little bit more. And
it's important. Like, today's episode isn't going to be one of these kind of like, what is your background and what is like, how have you gotten, you know what I mean? Like, what did you do? It's not going to be like, what happened to you? Yeah, exactly.
Answer, so like, it'll just be more of a flowing conversation.
And it's more really about kind of the lessons and the kind of the way something has shaped you and kind of changed the way that you've redirected in life and ultimately changed your kind of motivations or your passions or your values. And so before we get into today's episode though, let's give them a life update and kind of what have we been up to recently. So what did we do this morning?
Yeah, so
what did you get this morning? You have some exciting new things, some new toys.
So if you guys remember on the last couple episodes, I was talking about maybe getting a new pair of shoes. I finally ordered the New Balance Super Comp Trainer version 3. So this is the upgraded version from the old shoe that I was training in for my first and second half marathon, the shoes that I love. Unfortunately, those old shoes have holes in them now and are just very worn down. So I thought it was time to get a new pair. So I'm super excited to try them out. They look really clean and fresh. Calvin has the Super Comp Elite and they're the same colorway. So we're going to be matching.
They are matching pretty much. And I actually need to clean those because I have a little bit of grass stain on them.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So I need to make sure they look like fresh as they can be. But I think it's interesting because you have not the average foot, and so I think it's amazing that you can find a shoe that at least fits well enough with a carbon plate, because it's very hard for you to find carbon shoes.
To be fair, that's why I went with New Balance, because I know they usually just fit wider in general than most other shoe brands. Like, I've tried on the Saucony and I've tried on Hoka. I've tried on so many brands of carbon plated shoes and they just do not fit my wide feet. The only one that fit was the Hoka Mach 6, or what was it called?
No, the Cielo.
Oh, totally wrong.
I think it was the Cielo. It was a
carbon plated Hoka shoe, but it was in a men's like D width or something, but in like a women's size. I don't really know how that works in Australia. I have no idea. It fit pretty well, however, it just wasn't the right shoe for me because it didn't have enough ankle stability. But I found a new shoe. I'm going to test them out, obviously, this week before Hyrox, and my plan is to wear them for Hyrox because I don't have another option.
I need to go into a tangent right off the bat. Okay. I love this. Okay. So anyone who's training for something has likely been around or looked up, and they look up like informational videos about whether it's like what kind of like training you should do in like a prep or taper, and like what kind of nutrition you should be doing. And this morning it really hit home with me because it's remarkable how complicated even experts like nutritionists can get with it. And don't get me wrong, like I am not an expert in nutrition. However, I feel that I'm an expert in competing in sports because that's experience, right? Yeah. And there's the what am I trying to say? No, I can't believe I forgot this. There's the theoretical and there's the practical.
Okay.
Okay. Like, you know exactly what. Okay. Yeah. So there's the theoretical and there's the practical. And honestly, I think the practical gets lost so often because I was just like listening to this person talk, and what people need to remember is if you don't live it, if you don't really live competition, then like your nutritional advice is usually too vague and too broad. And when people say it's like, here's how you should eat 1 week leading into a race, and it's like 1/3 of your plate's carbs, 1/2 of your plate is protein, or you know what I mean, and then 1/4 of your plate is fats or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like it's the most useless information. If you don't know certain things like that, like it's like, where have you been living? Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, like, and even saying things like you need to like be consistent, you need to keep eating the same things, like those are good pieces of advice, but I think sometimes it's just funny how like the information becomes so generalized when you're an expert. And it's like
But I think when you pay for someone to be your nutritionist, that's when it comes more specific. Obviously, if they're posting stuff online, or like today at that, when she was giving the presentation, I think like obviously it's going to be just a bit more vague and broad because everyone's body's different. She's not going to go into detail about exactly what to eat and how much of it because everyone's different. So maybe that's just different, but I do know what you mean, though. It's just very broad.
And what I mean by this is like, if an important thing to consider while prepping in sort of meal timing for a big event is like, the most important thing is saying, if you consume this amount of calories, you should be in a surplus, and like that's number one, right? So now you've given someone a takeaway point. Number two, it's like if you often train on caffeine, then you need to be at or above 100 milligrams of caffeine going into the race, right? Like very, very executionable. Just made that word up. Very tangible targets that you can hit, and really I think that's what is lost sometimes when like people who are experts feel like they have to say everything that they know, when really there's just a few things that can actually make the biggest difference. And I think that's just like something I wanted to mention because when you're preparing for your next event or your next race or whatever it is, just focus on these little hacks. I call them like these little hacks. Like if you
the free speed.
The free speeds is if you went to someone who was competing at the highest level, you'd want to know like how many hours of sleep are they getting? What are the meal windows that they're hitting? Not like, around 2 to 4 hours. And this is what I mean. It's like, you might be trying to understand what I'm trying to say. It's like 2 to 4 hours is a huge window, right? Like, I want 3 hours and 17 minutes. That's when you're eating that meal. You know what I mean? Exactly. Like, be more precise is what I'm saying, with the way you operate, because the consistency, sure, the word consistency is great, but like, what does that look like? It's like, it's preparing, right? Like, just like I talked about last episode, is like the difference of planning and preparing is preparing. You understand when things don't go the way you expect them to, you are also able to still move forward. So, sorry, that was a little bit of a side tangent, but this morning we had our last Hyrox simulation kind of workout, little tester,
it
feel.
It was more just like an event. So Ollie Moore put on this Hyrox training day at Atora, and we wanted to go to support him, and it was really cool. Like he put on a cool event. There was On running shoes there to supply shoes to test out. I actually tried the On Cloud Eclipse, and I actually really liked running in them. I think
more for an easy day though.
Yeah, definitely. Just easy day. I did try on the carbon plate shoes that they have, but they just felt way too stiff for me. But anyways, there was also LSKD there. We got some nice pastries from a bakery that's in the Gold Coast, and they were super delicious. And yeah, it was just a fun event, and
it's just a beautiful day today, and that's like one of the best things. A Sunday, beautiful day here in the Gold Coast.
And we met the king himself, Hunter McIntyre.
The bulk pony biceps win races.
Yep.
The man himself. And
it was so crazy, like, hearing him talk in person, because if you guys have listened to him on podcasts or whatever, he's a character. Like, everything about him is a character. And when you see him in person and how he's the exact same that he is online, you're like, holy fuck, this guy is literally a character in real life.
Yeah, and there's no better way to say it. It's like you watch him operate in the way he thinks and the way he tells stories, and I'll just say this, is like, he was telling a story today about how he reads a lot of books, and he reads and watches a lot of videos on people who have done hard shit.
Yeah, like biographies.
Like, really, biographies and stuff. Yeah. And, like, just tries to study kind of what they've done in their lives. And he used this analogy of, like, a gardener, and how he would never study
a gardener's biography.
And then he talked about, I can't remember the guy's name, but he basically said that this guy was an explorer and was in, like, northern Finland and killed, like, and he lost his jacket and was, like, freezing cold, and so he killed a seal and then took the seal's like,
what Calvin's trying to say is that he tells these complicated stories, but then somehow ties it back to the question or the point, and you're like, how did you just think of that? And it's just like this.
It's so fluid that you're like, what the hell did he just say? Yeah. And it's hilarious because you're like, that was the craziest.
But then it makes a lot of sense too.
Oh, 100%. It's so crystal clear.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most awesome things of just this morning. It was when you've seen someone operate, like, and he teeters this line of very confident, serious, and taking himself as, like, this archetype, like, jokingly and, like, laughing at himself almost. And I think when I think of, like, kind of how I want to be perceived, but also how I want to live, is there's, like, this perfect balance of, like, taking things seriously and, like, winning and putting that on one side of my life, and the other being able to still, like, enjoy, laugh, and tell funny stories. And that's, like, so important, because if you have this imbalance of that, I think you can get too caught up in, like, just intensity, or I don't know, just, do you know what I'm saying by that?
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, it was a super fun morning, and yeah, so we're 1 week out from Hyrox. That's our update, kind of.
Yeah, so let's get into today's episode. So today's episode, like we talked about, will be about Tash and where she has been. So
and guys, if you're listening, next week's episode will be the same thing but about Calvin, so you'll kind of get to know a little bit about both of us.
Yeah, so stay tuned for episode 18. It'll be a good one, guaranteed.
We also need to do a Hyrox debrief episode as well, so you might get 2 episodes next week if we have time.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. Or maybe we'll have one come out the week after.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Tash, why don't you start off by just telling the viewers what you what
is it that hard?
It is hard. It is hard because it's like where do you think it's so funny when you've told people what are you laughing?
I'm just thinking about the scene from The Office where Michael Scott goes he's like, and if you watch The Office you know exactly what I'm talking about, and I totally forget how it goes, but he goes like, don't ever for the life of you ever for any reason ever, and he just like keeps like talking, and he like,
well, no, it's funny, like, it's funny because fitness is such a big part of your life, and I was gonna ask you about like kind of like where fitness started, but that's way too late. And that's why I got caught up. Is like I know you so well that it's like, no, we can't start there. And now I kind of know where I want to start. Is like, talk about your childhood and talk about kind of what your life was like when you were young, and kind of your family situation and how that kind of shaped you into kind of where you were going, what path you were on when you were young.
Yeah, so to be honest with you guys, I've blocked out a lot of my childhood, not because I wanted to, just because it was kind of just like a coping mechanism, I guess. But grew up in a very loving, kind home and family with a single mom and an older sister and a younger sister. Dad not in the picture whatsoever. So it was just kind of tough because growing up, I didn't have, first of all, many friends that kind of like understood what it was like to grow up with just a mom. And like all of my friends in school like were, I guess, normal and had the normal family. So yeah, growing up was a little bit tough just in terms of, you know, finances, comparing myself to other people in school, this and that. So yeah, it was all right though. Like looking back, I don't have anything like to complain about, obviously.
Can I ask you something though? So when I grew up, for those of you who don't know this, I grew up with two moms, two mothers, and I was born through like a sperm donor. And when people ask me later in life, what was it like to grow up with two moms? Because like people are just curious because it's kind of unordinary. And I don't really like when I really truly think about it, it's like it was just my reality. It was just my reality. So that's kind of what I'm curious with you.
That's how I feel too. It's like that's all I knew. I didn't know what it was like to.
But so you did feel different though, or you felt like that was like you were proud to be different?
No, I was proud, but I also just didn't know what it felt like to actually have two parent figures, because I was so young when my parents divorced that I don't remember what it felt like to be living under the same roof as both of them. So.
But you also didn't have to like go through the. Like it had its challenges, but some people with divorced parents have to like bounce back and forth, and you had some more stability.
So
in that
that's
sense.
why I'm grateful, is because of the stability. And although like growing up, like just with my mom, a lot of people would be like, "Oh, that's so hard," like not having your dad in the picture. But like, I didn't really care because I love my mom. So what do you think?
Growing up with a single parent who, I assume, had to provide for all three of you.
Yeah.
And had to work a ton of hours. Like anyone who's listening or trying to understand like and relate, like what would you say to someone who is in a similar situation, or like kind of explain how that influenced you?
I guess it influenced me to grow up a little bit faster than maybe I wanted to. Like, looking back, I feel like I didn't really like get to like live like my childhood. Like, if you asked me like what are the funnest moments like when you were a child, like I don't really remember. Like, I don't remember like you know, like going to the park with my friends and doing silly things and like just living life. You know, do you know what I mean? Or going cliff jumping like and this, that. Like,
you had to take on responsibilities much younger.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Just because, if you guys don't know, I have a younger sister. She's 10 years younger than me, which is like quite a bit younger. So obviously, as she was growing up, my mom was working a lot as well. So I was the one a lot of the time who would stay home with her and take care of her a lot. So yeah, my younger sister and I have a really, really good relationship because of just how much time we spent together. And she was like she when she was young, like she was like the funniest person you could ever be around. I have so many Snapchat memories of just us hanging out and having fun. And yeah, it was a good time just growing up with her. But back to my point, because I was the one who kind of was around taking care of her a lot of the time, it just felt like I couldn't have time to myself to maybe be a kid. Yeah. But I don't like regret any of it, obviously, but I just don't remember my childhood that well because I just kind of chose to block it out, if that makes sense.
Yeah. When you were young, how did you see success? Like, what did you envision success was? And like looking at like kind of your mom and maybe your older sister as just maybe influences, but also just other influences. Like, what was your kind of envision of success?
That's kind of a hard question because let me think about it. I remember when I was in high school, when Calvin and I were in the same high school program when we first met. We were going around in a circle with our class of 50 kids, and I vividly remember this day because our teacher asked us, what is your end goal in life? Like, what do you want to do? And I remember saying, I'm going to open a gym. I'm going to own a gym and open a gym. And I guess like when I was in high school, I thought like that would be success because it would be owning your own business. And there are like obviously many ups and downs with that. But in my head back then, I didn't think it was that hard of a thing to do. If you asked me that today, I would probably give you a very different answer just because of everything I've learned in this fitness industry right now. Maybe, yeah, if I had unlimited funds, I would want to start a gym, but it is a very tricky industry to get into, and you would have to have a lot of starting capital to.
Why don't you talk about what you know about getting into gyms for anyone who's listening? Like, why would you feel that way though?
It's just from like kind of just what I've learned over the years and being part of a gym that actually like closed down recently and just like everything about it. I think in order to own and operate a successful gym, first of all, you need to build a community. You need a place where people can go to make friends who feel included, like no matter what. And obviously, number 2, you need a pricing strategy where you are still making profit, but it's not going to make your members broke. So you just need to find that pricing strategy and obviously work it out in terms of what your overhead costs are and how much it costs to obviously run the building and your wages and everything. It all comes down to business at the end of the day. And I'm really glad that I studied business in university because now I have a better understanding of how everything works. Obviously, it is kind of common sense, But anyways, it obviously depends when it comes to gym and whatever. Every gym is different, but yeah, from what I know, it's very hard to make like a good margin off of owning a gym, just because of how expensive the costs are to run everything. So in order to have an expensive gym, you would have to offer something, first of all, that is very different from everything around you, to the point where you can increase your price point and people would still be willing to pay for it. So for example, offering like cold plunge, sauna, that kind of stuff. Like a lot of gyms back home where we're from don't have that kind of stuff. Either that or I don't know really where I was going with this.
I think I know what you're saying. It's like, if your gym only offers like one kind of area of like fitness or wellness and stuff, then the members, if they're not just like one-sided, they're gonna need to go to a bunch of different places to access that, which then creates another issue where they don't have unlimited money.
Exactly. And I think so for example, I went to my CrossFit gym back home, loved it there, whatever, but then I was also paying for a membership at my commercial gym because it had the sauna and a few machines that my CrossFit gym didn't have. So like obviously in a realistic world that you would only have to pay for one gym membership, and obviously that is still a goal of mine. I would want to like operate a gym that offers a lot of group fitness classes and machine and open gym stuff, but also all the recovery stuff that you would need.
I agree. I think
but it all comes down to whether or not you can make money, because at the end of the day, you need money. You need profit to survive. Like, I'm not going to start a business, as much as I want to just start a business just for the fun of it, even if it fails, like whatever. But at the end of the day, it does come down to profit. And if you're not making a profit, why are you doing it?
100%. And I think one of the other things that's so interesting is, just when I was back in San Jose working at the gyms for like over 3 years, and my boss opened at least, he was running at least 3 gyms and was starting to open a 4th right when I was leaving. And seeing people who are gym owners and how hard and how much work they put in.
Yeah, it's actually crazy.
It is important to understand that just opening a gym, or even if you haven't even thought about it, which most people who are listening to this have definitely realized that it's like an insane amount of work, because the truth of it all is, because it's so competitive and because things can affect it so much, that you could lose everything so fast. And I think that's what's crazy, is like just the gym that I work here, and kind of how it's trying to recover from some bad reputation because of some people in the past that were working there. And I think it's interesting is like, it takes little drops to build a brand, but you lose it in buckets. Yeah. And you can lose it so fast. And I think that it goes with any brand, but I think in a small community where like a gym is so like monumental, that like once you lose it, it's like you might as well.
And that goes to my other point, is just if you want a brand and a business, let alone a gym, be successful, the owner needs to be involved, and the owner needs to show that they're passionate about it, because it all comes down to that. Like, if you look at companies like BPN, the reason that they're so successful and got so big is because you know who the owner is, and you know how committed he is into making the best performance endurance products possible on the market. And that also translates into gyms and stuff. Like, seeing in San Jose the gym owner just run the business and how passionate he was about it, versus someone back home who is just half involved and it was just a side hustle for them. Like, there's no wonder why that business failed. Like, you just need to be all in or nothing. And I feel like that's what we've learned over the years. It's just all in or nothing. And that's what we're trying to do as well. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it is very hard.
It's not just enough to have skin in the game. It's not enough. It's a big piece of it. But if you are not invested, like you're saying, like if you're not fully invested in, like, passionate about that, and it's like you're trying to do it kind of 50%. I think that's what we've learned from even doing the podcast is, like, if you're just kind of in it, people notice. People always notice when you're just kind of trying to do too much. And I've told Tash before, like, there's nothing worse than seeing someone who like starts something and then just kind of it fizzles. It fizzles. And that's the best word, is it just kind of fizzles and dies. And it honestly, it does more damage because it kind of speaks to your character, and you're honestly better off. It's tough. When you say, or you are starting something completely new, that is the hardest part. And don't get me wrong, like, I think it's good to take risks. I think you need to be careful, because when you start something and then you don't follow through with it, and then it kind of just fizzles, like I said, sometimes people kind of associate you with kind of trying to do too much, that, like, you actually never probably in the first place had the capacity. And I think that's to handle it. Yeah.
It's a lot of work. I think to start your own hustle or whatever it is so much more work than you think to go all in. Huh. I only say this because that in and itself is a full-time job. On top of that, balancing your mental health, your physical health, your relationships, your friendships, everything you need to do to take care of your house and the place you live. It's just like, there's only so many hours in a day.
I don't know many people.
And on top of that, even having to do your job, your actual job, to make enough to pay for rent and whatever. Like, it is so hard. And I wouldn't change it for the world, but I don't think people realize how much effort that goes into creating something. Yeah, and not only that, like, I don't know a single person who has ever successfully worked full time and pursued their passion. And that's, like, just the reality of there's just no way. There's give and take, and most people who are doing, like, this kind of side hustle go from these extremes. And even this guy that I'm good friends with here in the Gold Coast, who he's seen some traction in his social media growth and just his content strategy, has realized that, like, he needs to put his podcast on the side right now because he's seeing a lot of potential and just, like, continuing to build his social medias up. And trying to spread himself right now is ultimately not what he's seeing produce results. Yeah, and then when you spread yourself too thin, that's when you run into issues.
Yeah, and the quality goes down. And ultimately, he had to start a new job. And that's the thing. And so the reason I also am saying this is because he had to start a full-time job working as a laborer because he needed more money to supplement. And so he's in a good spot where he's making good money now, but his passion is now back to a side hustle.
Yeah.
And I think this is so important, is, like, once it goes back to a side hustle because you realize you need to survive and provide for yourself, then it creates even more issues because you do need to have these kind of strategies to stay consistent. And so
anyways, back to my childhood. I don't know how we got here, but I think you asked what my version of success was. Mm-hmm. And if you asked me back in high school, I would say that I'd want to own a gym. Looking back now, that's not really a measurable way of achieving success.
The reason I asked you that too is when we first started dating, I remember you telling me a very quantifiable number. I said, Tash, what do you think success is?
Yeah, and in my head, this is just from what I was told at school and whatever, and having a good stable job that paid you $100,000 a year, that was very successful.
And I think it's so important because I think it's incredible how different that perspective is from just like where my point of view in my own personal situation and like the people that I was always surrounded with. And like I always thought like $100,000 was like average, or even like that was like my default kind of thing. And I do think it is slightly naive, because there's a lot of people who are super, super less fortunate. And I just think that how that has evolved, like, there's no other way to say it than like, what do you think? How do you,
obviously, like, since we were kids, times have changed so much now to the point where $100,000 is probably average now. But back then, that was a big number of money.
No, the minimum wage is like $40,000 or $30,000. It's way lower than people realize. Like the average minimum wage, or sorry, not minimum wage, the average wage in like Canada or the US, it's like $30,000.
No, I know. I'm just saying, when we were kids, $100,000 versus now $100,000, because of inflation, it's just very different.
Yes, it is different. But I just think that like kind of where you saw your path or your potential is like, if you had told yourself when you were in high school or whatever that, and this is important, is if you had told yourself then that you had made $100,000, and this is what I wanted you to talk, like kind of go into more detail about, is like, if you said you made $100,000 a year, I don't think you would have needed much more. Like, obviously everyone wants more and more, but like, if in your head you're like $100,000, that is success.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think that's kind of how you feel now. Like, I think $100,000 would be nice, like if you made $100,000 a year, but I think your dreams have magnified.
I think for me personally, I don't want to measure success on finances. That's just the way that I feel and the way that I perceive life. I think for me, success would be more of a feeling of feeling comfortable and not being stressed about finances. And everyone's going to have a different number in their head.
Right.
And you cannot say that there's one right number, because to someone that could be $20,000 a year, and to someone that could be $300,000 a year. I'm at the point right now where any amount of money that would be coming in would be success. Because let me tell you, moving across the world, although it was a very good decision, was a very hard decision, because we're basically living paycheck to paycheck right now, and it is something I've never had to experience before. Although growing up with not a lot of money, that's like a completely different feeling to now than being on your own and not having a lot of money. It's a very scary feeling. And it's something that I think I needed to experience, but it's also something that is making me hungry to want to be more successful, because I know that there's no other option, and I know that this is going to have to work out. Because at the end of the day, rent is due next week, and you're going to have to fork up the money to pay for it. So that's just kind of how I feel. Obviously, everyone has a different number in their head when it comes to financial success. For me, it would just be to live comfortably and not have to be stressed about spending money, whether that's on the little things like coffee and this, that, or even making some bigger purchases. Like, I feel like when you take stress out of it, life becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, because I think a lot of people say, like, I don't want to think about money. That's not, like, I don't want to, like, success and money aren't hand in hand. And I 100% agree. I think success is a feeling.
Yeah.
And it's a constant pursuit of a feeling to like feel like to feel like you're happy with the things you have and the ability to do things, right? It's not attainable. With that being said, there's things I think that people would like to do that are only attainable by having or earning a certain amount of money and having the freedom to take those travels or take those vacations.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of quantify it in that sense. And I think it's important to understand, like, you need to really be able to weigh what you would like to get out of life and what sort of stuff what you want to do for work.
Yeah.
So that you can give yourself the opportunity to give yourself the freedom.
Yes.
Because I think freedom is really what everybody wants.
Success and freedom go hand in hand. And
100%. And so, anyway, that's enough to talk about that.
About money.
About money, because it really wasn't about that.
Yeah.
Let's get into how you went from that sort of childhood to wanting to train, work out. Where did you start to get that burning desire to be more involved in fitness?
So I guess it just all goes back to high school, and I guess before high school, Calvin and I actually, a few episodes before this, recorded an episode that we scrapped because we were having, say, technical difficulties. But in that episode, I went into how I did not play sports growing up, and I've probably mentioned this before, but I didn't play any sports. My mom put me and my sisters in dance class because if she were to put us into a sport, she wouldn't have had the time to be there to support us in that sport. I don't know if you guys understand what I'm trying to say, but growing up with a lot of people in my school who played like rep sports and whatnot, it takes a lot of time. And even my cousins who played rep soccer, my aunt spends countless hours driving to and from games and this and that. And to be honest, my mom didn't have time for that because she was so busy working so hard to provide for her family. So she put us into dance because it was one of those things where she didn't have to be there all the time. It's just like no one's parents were allowed to be in there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's just a very different feeling. So like you get dropped off at dance class and you get picked up. And so I did that. I did ballet when I was very, very young. And then
so who used to drive you to dance?
It would be my grandma or my uncle helped out a lot. It would very rarely be my mother because she was working. Mm-hmm. Like we would have to just find ways around it. And by the end of it, I'm pretty sure I had to find my own rides. And so that was the only kind of physical exercise that I got. And if you knew me when I was a kid, I was a fat kid. And I vividly remember growing up, maybe when I was in grade 5 or grade 6, you're just at that age where you're starting to become more aware of what people's bodies look like and what's normal, what's not. And I remember this one summer where I realized I'm overweight. And my family had a Wii Fit. And this is where my body dysmorphia started. I got on that Wii Fit and it said, your BMI is obese, with the red numbers. You guys will literally remember that if you know what I'm talking about. Did you have a Wii Fit?
Yeah, of course I did. That was insane.
So I was obese growing up because my Wii Fit told me I was obese.
Was it true?
It wasn't true. I think the definition of obese is actually I literally don't know what the definition of obese is. But I was overweight. I was not obese, but like obviously that's where my insecurities started. So that whole summer I spent it inside playing Wii Fit on that little white stupid thing, doing the little stepper game, like step, playing golf and like doing that step game. Do you remember that?
Kind of. But like,
and playing Just Dance. And I literally lost most of my childhood fat that summer because I had some very deep-rooted insecurities from my Wii.
It was from the Wii or not? It wasn't social.
It wasn't social. It was because my Wii told me I was obese.
Interesting. That's like that should be studied how motivational that was.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So anyways, grew up not playing sports. And then when I got into high school, I stopped dance. So I was doing dance up until grade 8 once a week. That's not very much exercise, I will tell you that. But yeah, it was once a week. And then in high school, I stopped because I just didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't necessarily enjoy it, and I just didn't have the time either because I don't know if you guys know, but I had to start working. Was that proper English?
Yeah, you had to start working. Yeah.
I had to start working when I was in the 8th grade because like that's just the way it was. So I was like 13 or 14 when I started working. And yeah, I had to pay for my own phone, my phone bill if I wanted that, if I wanted any like extra things just in overall life necessities, makeup, this, that, I paid for it myself.
Do you remember
it's not like anything, like no shade to my mother whatsoever. Like I'm glad that we were taught to get a job at a young age.
But do you remember what she said? Like, what are the conversations that she had with you that like made you feel like that, made you realize that? Because those are some like serious conversations.
It was just straight up like, if you want a phone to be able to text your friends and have cellular data, back then it was like 500 megabytes or something.
Yeah.
Now it's like unlimited 200 gigabytes. It's so crazy how times have changed. But if I wanted that 500 megabytes of data to use to be able to use Snapchat when I took the bus home from school and stuff, like, yeah, you had to pay for that yourself. There was just no money to be able to...
Right.
You know what I mean?
You had to get a job.
Yeah, I had to get a job.
And that's a tough thing when you're... How old are you when you're in 8th grade? Like 14, 13?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a tough thing to realize when you're 13 years old. Especially when your friends are in a completely different stage in their lives. Like, I don't know many people who had jobs when they were 13 or 14. And I think it maybe goes into... Like, do you think it was hard to relate to people when you were that age in that sense, or no?
Definitely. And my whole life I grew up with the feeling of no one understands me. Just because of the way I grew up and everything, how I feel, how I'm so introverted, how I really value my time alone, how I take fitness so seriously now. I just feel like no one understands.
And what do you mean though by like no one understands? Because you isolate yourself, no one understands, or you don't let people understand, or you don't communicate?
I think I haven't been surrounded by the right people until I moved here.
You felt isolated?
I think it took me 23 years to finally feel like people understand me, which is like a crazy thing to say. Because the people you surround yourself with, if they're not supportive of you, or if they don't care about you, if they don't ask you how you're doing or like what you're passionate about, or even care what you're passionate about, then something's wrong. And if you're always the one who's having to, like make plans or be the first to ask about how their life is and what they're doing, like it gets tiring to the point where like, I'm done putting in this effort. Why would I waste my time putting in effort for these friendships where it's not reciprocal? And I feel like when we moved here, I've finally found some people who actually understand what it's like to want to be good at something and train really hard and spend all this time in the gym and want to create content because I enjoy it, not because I'm trying to show off or prove myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I just had a recent experience where very similar, where you're talking to somebody and then you're being curious. It's so important to be curious. I think it's one of the most important things you can have. Sure. Is like just like understanding that you can learn from any single person. You can learn from everybody. Everyone's gone through different stuff. Everyone's gone through different hardships and adversity, and you can learn from people that you would never realize or never even think just by having conversations. And I think that there's so many people that lose that outlook and feel as if their time or their focus or whatever they're doing is more valuable or more important. Mm-hmm. And it's so frustrating because then it's just like this, it leaves this pit inside of you. It leaves this feeling inside of you where you put in effort and it's either not reciprocated or it's just kind of like, you just kind of leave the conversation and you're like, does that person even give a fuck?
Yeah.
Like, do they even care?
Probably not.
Probably not. And if you're asking yourself that, then I think there's really two ways to deal with it. You either have to seriously consider like why that's happening or why that you are getting that feeling. And then with that, you need to either one, separate yourself, or two, confront the person at some point. And now granted, like I think there's certain times where like maybe you don't have the depth of the relationship, or I think there's a lot of people who need more time to cultivate relationships. I think this is important. Is like I've always been someone who is very like all or nothing. And so I know very quickly or very like very quickly whether I like or don't like someone or whether I do or don't want to spend time with them. Mm-hmm. And I'm very easy and I make it known.
I agree too. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people who like to people please in the sense where they just kind of beat around the bush and are just nice to everybody just to be nice. Yeah. And it is very difficult because it's like you're like, why are you always flaky, or why are you always doing that? And it's because they struggle with being authentic. They struggle with being, and it's not you. It is not you. If someone can't communicate to you like the truth, then you ultimately need to take the responsibility into your own hands. And I think we've talked about that a lot recently, and just who we surround ourselves with, which is so important.
Yeah.
So,
but back to kind of just my background in fitness, just to finish this thought off. So in high school, I started this personal fitness class. I may have talked about this on the podcast before, but I had this gym teacher, and she was amazing. She was the OG hybrid athlete before hybrid athletes were mainstream. Like, she ran marathons. She did bodybuilding shows. She was a yoga instructor. She did CrossFit. Like, literally anything you can think of. She did it.
And it was a woman.
And it was a woman, yeah. And I loved her. And she gave me like a sense of purpose and confidence. And I think that's kind of just what kickstarted my fitness journey was her giving me confidence. Because she, I don't know, she just like really helped me out. I don't know if you can relate to that or not, but
in the sense that like when you went into the weight room, that like she was always looking out for you, or like I do hear you, but
she was looking out for me.
Were you one? Like, how many women were in this weight class?
A few, But it was just the way she treated us, and like she would compliment me that she was seeing progress and that I was like good at one thing and or maybe not so good at the other. Just like I just enjoyed being in that class, and it brought me a lot of joy, and just learning about all different types of training. And she took us through like CrossFit classes, and we just did a whole bunch of different workouts, and I found my love for working out in high school because of her.
Mm-hmm. And from that experience into what we know and you've explained before, into like diving into bodybuilding and like focusing on just aesthetics and glutes and feeling good, into then the shift that you've made to more functional and more performance stuff, which we've all talked about. What do you see as like the most important things you've learned a part of this journey? And like, what would you tell yourself when you were younger? Would you tell yourself like that's part of the process, or do you wish that you just kind of had found things earlier? Like, would it have been nicer to found, or did you need to go through all these kind of different changes?
Well, looking back, it would have been nice to be surrounded by fitness and sports at a younger age. I still don't like sports. I'm just going to say that. I only like watching tennis. I don't like watching any other sports. I don't really enjoy playing team sports. And I don't know if it's because I never experienced it. Mm-hmm. But what was your question again? Sorry. I got off track.
No, the question was what like the path where you went from bodybuild, like PFIT to bodybuilding, aesthetic training, to more functional, to more like training for like competitions now.
Yeah.
Like, do you wish that you could have just gotten to where you are, like it had just started with what you're doing now? Or do you think it was like you needed to kind of wibbly wobble back and forth?
I will say, so it would have been nice to be surrounded by that at a young age. Because now, when you look at a lot of people who are doing very well in sports like Hyrox and whatnot, you look at their history and how they grew up, and it's like, they've been running since they were a kid. Like, they literally were running since they could walk. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? It would have been nice to have that advantage. But I feel like that also makes me unique because I want to do well. And I don't have that advantage. I started running like a year and a half ago. Like, I never ran before this. Yeah. I never played sports before this. I was not athletic before this. So I think that just makes me unique, and I hope that can also inspire other girls to want to start doing stuff like this, because it just goes to show you don't have to have this complex sports background to then become an athlete.
I 100% agree. I think what's interesting is the people. There's different types of people that stay in fitness, and I would say we're very different in this sense, because my identity was fitness from a young age, and I stuck with it all the way out, and that like has always been a part of my identity. It was like all the setbacks, all the times I was cut, all the times I didn't make the team, all the times I failed, we lost, the team didn't do well, whatever. Like, I had to endure that process and like continue to show up because of some sort of enjoyment or something about it that made me feel like there was more fuel or there was more wood to burn. And I think what's interesting is, from your point of view though, like there hasn't ever been like people necessarily, or a sport where you had to overcome like a true loss until you started getting into more of this kind of feeling of like comparing. But I think what's interesting is like, do you think that affects your mindset and how you compete now? Is like, do you think that there's a level of maybe resilience or lack of resilience sometimes, where like when someone says like, you didn't make the team, kid, like you didn't make the team this year, and like you either get to decide whether you want to keep playing the sport or quit. Like most kids quit at 17, 18 years old. Yeah. And so like thinking about that kind of, what does that make you feel in terms of like how you just love the sports, but you never had to deal with that sort of side of things?
Yeah. I never had to deal with that, and I never had to really deal with rejection. Mm-hmm. But I feel like there were other things in my mind that kind of consumed me back then, and I used to compare myself a lot to a lot of people. I would follow all these OG fitness influencers back in the day and be like, why don't I look like them? Not realizing they're like 10, 15 years older than me and have so much more under their belt. And who knows, like, it could have been edited, this, that, like, so many factors. Mm-hmm. And, like, it all comes down to the cliche quote that comparison is the thief of joy. And you cannot compare yourself to anyone, because everyone is on their own journey, and you can only compare yourself to the last version of yourself, whatever that version is, and just trying to beat that version and become a better version in whatever way that is for you. And for me, that's probably just going to be getting a better Hyrox time than my last time, or being able to complete a full marathon instead of the half marathon, and just being able to complete it. Because back when I first started running, I never would have thought ever that I would be able to do a half marathon. I couldn't run for 2 kilometers without gasping for air and my knees hurting so bad that I thought I'd have to go to the hospital. But it all comes down to just consistency and discipline. And if you want something, you really just have to work for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, when last episode, you told me and you told us, like, you have a fear of being average. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, whether they know it or not, definitely have share that feeling. I think a lot of people share that feeling where it's like they want to be, if not even just average, they want to feel unique. Yeah. They want to feel special, because everyone wants to feel that way. Yeah. You want to feel that because that's what makes you feel like you have purpose. Yeah. Right? So how do you avoid this fear of being average when the definition of being average is relative to other people?
For me, it's surrounding myself with people that are above average. If I surround myself and I go into the gym and there are people around me that have 5-10 years experience on me, I'm going to want to be better at what I'm doing, because there are better people there who know more than me, who just have more experience, who maybe look better. Not necessarily that I care about how I look, but a lot of people do. But yeah, I feel like you can't get lost in the comparison, but you have to just move past the idea of being average without getting lost in the comparison.
You have to get away. I like what you're saying about surrounding yourself with people who are above average. Yeah. And what you're saying though is when you surround yourself with people who are above average, you know, like you internalize that they are already doing better than you.
Yeah.
So you're not comparing yourself to them, or are you like, you're just saying, I trust that if I surround myself with people who are where I want to be, that I will get better. Yeah. I will individually get better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's important to like anyone who's listening is like, when you do prioritize that aspect of like surrounding yourself with people who are going to allow you to grow, then ultimately all ships rise.
Yeah.
All ships will rise. Rising tides allow all ships to rise. That's the saying.
Exactly.
So in terms of like kind of how that background shaped you into launching your Built by Tash, I still remember this would have been like the summer after high school when I think you launched Built by Tash, and you've maintained the same brand name since then. So can you talk about just like the journey of how you launched it back then and where it is now?
Yeah. So I started my fitness account during COVID because during COVID was when I started actually like working out a lot more seriously, and it was when I got my personal training certification, because that was the route that I decided I wanted to go down. And I started an Instagram account during COVID, and I started just posting my workouts. I'm pretty sure it was like, if you scroll down at the very bottom of my Instagram, I'm pretty sure they're still there. It was like a lot of like workouts that I made on Canva that just like were just text on a screen of like what my workout was and for that day or whatever. And then that kind of progressed into slowly making more posts and more videos. And then I started just kind of taking a liking to more just video editing and creating workout content and sharing my content. And I started posting on TikTok.
What were you editing back then?
What was I editing?
What were you editing on?
Before CapCut, I'm pretty sure I used, the Clips app that used to be on the iPhone?
No.
There used to be an app on the iPhone called Clips, and I somehow started editing videos on there. I think maybe I even used like iMovie or something.
Yeah.
But I mostly started using CapCut, and to be honest, I was not great at first, but I started taking a liking to it, and I just kept posting, and now I love doing it, and it's something that I don't think I could live without, just because of like the joy it brings me and the satisfaction to edit a video. I just really enjoy the process of it. But yeah, it started in COVID. I was just posting like body weight workout circuits and stuff like at home workouts you can do with your dumbbells, whatever, right? And then as time went on, COVID got a little bit better. We were allowed back into the gyms, and I started doing more strength training. So I definitely kind of shifted my training a little bit more to just more bodybuilding, powerlifting, and glutes. And I don't regret this part of my life, but I definitely feel like a lot of girls just go through this phase where they want to grow their glutes like as big as they can. For whatever reason that is. For me, it was probably just for people noticing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think at the basis of that, you know what people are attracted to.
Yeah.
And I think that, yeah, like, I mean, it's just drilled into girls nowadays is like big butt and like lean.
Yeah.
That's like what people hear nowadays.
Yeah. But anyways, so.
Which is ironic because those things kind of do not go hand in hand.
Yeah. Started doing that. And then I want to say after that, there was a point in time where I discovered F45. This is where I'm going with this. And then I discovered F45, and I started doing a lot of F45 workouts and ended up getting a job at F45 gym, and I did that for a few years. And I loved coaching it. It was so fun. But I realized slowly that those type of F45 workouts, you can only grow so much. You can hit a plateau at a certain point. Yeah, with a high intensity exercise in a circuit style with light weights.
If anyone who's listening to this is kind of on that line of like, I want to try coaching, I want to explore that, I think F45 is one of the best places to do that, because
it was so fun. Yeah.
It's not like super high stakes, because I think one of the things that like you don't even realize and take for granted is now that you've been in, and anybody who's been in fitness for very long and is in these like gyms or these communities where it's like high performance or like super high level athletes and stuff, it's like if you're just starting out, it is way too intense and serious to maybe be where your first like fitness coaching job is. Yeah. And I think just places like F45 or like what's that new one, Body Fit Training, and like these new kind of similar things that are like just group training classes are so good for people starting out.
Yeah, for sure.
And you can really like decide whether you really like coaching or you're just there to kind of lead people through a workout, and then you don't have to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, one of the best things. So I started F45, and then I was doing F45 workouts, and then I was doing some gym stuff on the side, like just like I would hit hip thrusts like on the side a few times a week, and then then one summer I just completely stopped doing hip thrusts because I was like, I don't really care that much anymore, and I only did F45 workouts. She started dating me and she didn't care about her butt growth. That is basically what happened. No, that
is kind of true.
I think that boils down to when you spend time around me, you then allow yourself to be more authentic to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't do things just to please other people's eyes anymore, and just because that was what was trending. And I feel like a lot of people, just get like lost in like, oh, I need to look a certain way for people to like respect me or want to like me or this or that. And it's like, if you surround yourself with the right people, they should like you no matter what. Mm-hmm. And you shouldn't have to like.
But even more than that, like I don't even want people to be a facade or like a mirage of like what they want me to think that they are. You know what I mean? Like and that's kind of who I am, is I really drill people's character out of themselves, because it's like if you're just smoke and mirrors, like if you're not actually living and breathing like what you like who you are, and it's like what you're wasting my time.
Yeah.
And so but what I wanted to get into is like you built this, so you built by Tash.
Yeah.
And it started off as an Instagram account to post your fitness videos.
Yeah.
It then
and mostly just to inspire other people to keep active during COVID, because I really enjoyed it. I went through a breakup at the time in my first relationship, and it was like the only thing that kept me sane was like just working out every day to try to better myself, and I used that as like fuel to the fire. Like I don't really know if that's the expression you would say.
You dove into it as a way to divert your focus.
Yeah.
And I think like I mean that's adversity. Yeah. And when you go through any sort of challenge, and like having something like that is, I mean, I'm glad that like that was like your ability to move forward and manage that kind of like those negative kind of feelings when you when you've been invested in something like a relationship or anything that you're invested in. So when you went though from this fitness account that you started, and then you took it into like something that you started to invest more time in and creating more content, I think there's kind of these two avenues where it's split off recently, or maybe not necessarily recently, but in the last year, in that you love to create content, and I think you're good at it. I know you're good at it, in that like you love to create consistent content for people that are looking to start their fitness journey, or not even start. It's like more for people who maybe are like, or how would you explain that? What kind of content do you create for people?
I just want to be relatable. I want to be relatable, but I also want to inspire people to maybe try something new.
Inspire people who are like you?
Who were like me, who maybe didn't grow up playing sports and never worked out, and still probably never work out, or whatever place you're in. I just want to inspire people that they can do anything. Mm-hmm. Whatever that is, especially hybrid functional training, because it's changed my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's the one avenue that I feel like. And then the other avenue is like the more one-on-one kind of business side of things, where you want to be able to help people more personally.
Yeah. So
could you talk about how that kind of birthed itself?
Yeah. So last March or last February, I forget what month it was exactly, I launched my one-on-one coaching, which was online.
Was that with or before your run club?
That was kind of at the same time I had my run club back home. I think around the same time. But yeah, I decided I wanted to then offer one-on-one coaching to girls who needed a kickstart in their hybrid journey. But I was also open to helping people who like didn't want to run as well, if that makes sense. So I wasn't saying, oh no, you have to be a runner to be, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like I wanted it to be open to whoever. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I launched that last year, and it's been a slow growth, but I'm happy with where I'm at. I've learned a lot along the way, and there are some new exciting things happening in the pipeline, and I really want to offer more things to those who are interested in maybe trying this style of training.
So what have you learned though from just like launching that, and like what you expected versus what the reality was?
So I would say starting a business is much harder than you would think, and it requires a lot of effort, and you're going to learn so many little things along the way, and you're going to make mistakes. Everyone's done them. But if there's one thing I could tell myself, to my last year self, it would be that the day you plant the seed is not the day you eat the fruit. And I say this because I had such high hopes when I first launched my business. I was like, I'm planting the seed, like this is what's gonna help me grow, and I think I got too comfortable and maybe just too cocky about it, to the point where I actually really struggled to get clients, and it was way harder than I thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. And I think I just have to remind myself that, like I said, the day you plant the seed is not the day you eat the fruit. It's going to take a long time to build whatever that is, like trust, relationships, like your social media, like everything. It's going to take a lot more time and effort than you think, until one day that beautiful mango on the mango tree is going to be ready to eat, and you're going to cut up that mango, and it's going to be so delicious.
What a crazy analogy there. Now you're going into details about how good the mango was. We've lost where we started with that.
The day you plant the seed is not the day you eat the fruit.
It is one of the greatest analogies, I think. Is it a metaphor?
Yeah.
A metaphor of like how to think about progress. It is, you need to be so patient and you need to nurture it. It's not just planting the seed.
Yeah.
It's the soil you plant it in. It's the water that you give it every day.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you do with your goals that you set out, the business that you have started, that the business can be at any level. It can be something on Instagram. It can be something that you want to, like, it can be brick and mortar. It can be whatever, right? It can be as big or as small as you imagine. What are you doing consistently to get yourself the growth and the nutrients that it needs?
Which leads us to our free speed for today. I would say our free speed is that delayed gratification equals long-term success. And I feel like the people who succeed in life are the ones who stay patient and committed, even if you don't see immediate results. And if you trust the process and stay consistent, the fruit I was talking about earlier, it will come. And I feel like people just need to understand that delayed gratification equals long-term results.
Mm-hmm. I think my free speed of the day is going to be very simple, and it's going to be a call to action for anybody who's listening. And one of the greatest lessons that you've ever shown me since being in this relationship, and it's being able to simply create more than you consume. And like, if you can really internalize that, create more than you consume, it's such a simple way to view social media. And I think it's funny because we look at each other all the time and laugh. Like, not only us, but everybody is so addicted to just the social media.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That it's just a much better use of your time if you are thinking about, like, how can you create something
that's going to make an impact to other people,
rather than just like those moments where you've just spent time that you will never get back,
you're just searching for dopamine. And
and it's not, I don't think social media is all bad or all negative. Like, if you consume stuff, then maybe practice using it to create something. You know what I mean? Like, but like, just like you said, that's kind of really shifted my mindset in being able to, like, if I'm not creating more than I consume, then like maybe I go live more. Maybe I go and experience more. And so go and sign up for something, or go outside and exercise, or live, or meet up with people, rather than just being glued to the phone. So
exactly. So yeah, that was today's episode, guys. We hope you enjoyed episode 17 of the Free Speed podcast, getting to know me a little bit more.
Yeah, ultimately everybody has their own journey.
Yeah.
Whether you can relate to Tash's story or you can't, hopefully you can take something away from just her journey into where she's been and how she's gotten to where she is. Ultimately, like, that's the most valuable thing, I think, is like, we live in a life where so many people don't realize how little they know about one another.
Yeah.
And I think you make judgments and you make assumptions about other people so often where you really have no idea what they've come from or why they act the way they do. And so hopefully we can play a small part in, like, just starting that conversation, because I think the most important part of life is being connected and being in connection with others, and ultimately sharing those experiences and stories. And I think Tash and I hope to do that with this podcast and with anyone moving forward. And I think that's, like, ultimately the goal in life, is being able to connect with people. And so we hope we can do that more in the next couple months and moving forward. So thanks for listening to today's episode.
And we'll see you guys next week. And see you later.
See you next time.